Good afternoon, students.
Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
In the last class, we have started Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. And we have a great day on that because we have explained with a figure that is as shown in this. What is Sendai framework? In Sendai framework, the basic concepts include the scope and purpose, as we have already mentioned, what is scope and what is its purpose, and one global outcome, and one goal, and seven global targets, 13 guiding principles, four priority for action, and four levels that is local, national, regional, and global. Also, role of stakeholders, international cooperation, and global partnership. These all includely we say as Sentai framework. Okay, this is Sendai framework. And in this Sendai framework, in the last class, we have completed scope and purpose, global outcome, goals, and seven global targets. And very important thing in this part is seven global targets. I have already said you to draw this figure and draw the seven global target figure because these two are very important and probably they may ask the seven global targets for 7 or 8 marks. So you should do as I have mentioned. You have to draw this figure. You have to memorize this because if anything in this slide is missing, automatically your mark may go down according to which year we are planning for Sendai framework. That may be asked in your question paper. The seven global targets including reduction as well as increase, and there are four reduction strategies and three increasing strategies in a Sendai framework. The main global target is reducing mortality by 2030, and another thing is reduce affected pupil number by 2030 and reduce direct economical loss or what happens in global GDP. And we have explained, or with an example, we have explained that due to last 2 years, due to corona pandemic, that is COVID-19 pandemic, our GDP has gone very low and that caused a lot of economic losses. And also, we should reduce the damage to critical infrastructure and disruption of basic services by 2030. These are the reduction strategies. These four reduction targets are important in a Sendai framework. And there are three increasing targets. First one is country with national local disaster risk reduction strategies should be implemented or increased by 2020. Only the difference in year comes here, that is 2020 itself. All countries, almost countries should have a national or local disaster risk reduction strategy. And also, then there should be very much increase in international cooperation. Why? We need to protect the developing countries. We need to give assistance for the developing countries as some countries having well equipped and well developed versions of technology, so they can easily help the people or they can help the developing country while a disaster happens. They can motivate them, they can promote them, they can sponsor them. By that, An international corporation 2030 should be very much increase in disaster protection or disaster risk reduction. That is the next increasement. And finally, we should increase the availability and access to multi-hazard early warning system and disaster risk information and assessment. We know that we have different multi-hazard early warning system currently. Even we are having alert system during for flood, and when shutters are opening, dam shutters are opening, they have been giving early warning to the people. These all are we are having the basic concept. So now we are focusing to increase the availability and accessibility to early warnings. That is, some people in a remote area will not be able to get the details of the warning. In such case, we need to provide them, we need to guide them properly. For that, we should increase the number of early warning system. This is the final global target. So please note that there are 4 reducing targets and 3 increasing targets. So these are the things we have discussed till now. And now we will discuss, according to Sendai framework, the next level is 13 guiding principles. Very important. How many guiding principles are there? There are 13 guiding principles and for priority for action. These two are very important. Okay, and after this we have not much things to study, only guiding principles and priority for action. The role of stakeholders we have discussed a lot in the fourth module, and levels, local level, national level, regional level, and global level. There are different type of disaster management things, that also institutional arrangements, that also we have discussed. That is, in district level there is a district disaster management system, as well as state level there is state management system, and national level there is a national disaster management authority. And there is international level, there is UN is engaging with the different countries to the protection of nature as well as reduction in disaster in various parts of the world. And there are 4 levels. And we have some international cooperation and global partnership. That is, we have trading with different countries. Carbon trading, you already studied in your sustainable energy, that some countries may have producing different levels of carbon dioxide every day. So they need to compensate it with producing oxygen as well. For that, they are not having much place. They will trade with another country. They will give money to plant trees and every things in their country to get oxygen level equivalent to the carbon dioxide production in developed country. That's an example only. In such a way, international cooperation and tradings are very important. There should be global partnership. This much production should be done by this year. Everything should be monitored and explained. Okay, this is Sendai framework. So today's class I have going to explain you each term in a guiding principles and each term in a priority. There are 13 guiding principles in a Sendai framework. It's a basic and common things, and you should note down all these 13 points. The maximum chance of asking question from Sendai framework will be explain Sendai framework. Definitely there will be a question. Explain 7 global targets of Sendai framework, and third one will be explain 13 guiding principles, and finally 4 priorities of Sendai framework. This will be the probable question from this side. So all these points should be memorized, and at least what are the things mentioning here, how many numbers, everything should be memorized by you. And if you are taking the first part, that is primary responsibility of state to prevent and reduce disaster risk, including through corporation. The primary responsibility, that is in a disaster management situation, the primary responsibility of a state is to prevent the disaster risk. That is the first guiding principle. For that, they can take assistance from different agency by cooperation. That may include National Disaster Management Authority, State Disaster Management Authority, National Disaster Reduction Force, as well as National Disaster National Institute of Disaster Management. Anything can be taken. They can take guidance from all these institutions, mainly from NDMA, and by that we can reduce the impact of disaster. The second one is shared responsibility between central government, national authorities, sectors, and stakeholders as appropriate national circumstances. When a state is being under heavy threat of disaster, the central government as well as central agencies should share the responsibility. They should act accordingly whenever they require. The National Institute of Disaster Management should provide training and make the people who are under the threat of disaster properly before the disaster. They should be well prepared to act in a disaster situation. And the National Disaster Management Authority should coordinate all the disaster management activities, and central government should monitor every data, everything happen during a disaster, and consulting with National Disaster Management Authority. There is a specific ministry, that is Ministry of Home Affairs, will take care of disaster management situation in India. That is a nodal ministry. So we need to share our responsibility among central government, national authorities, sectors, and shareholders. And everything should be monitored according to the national circumstances. We cannot say in a floody situation, in earthquake, as well as in a road accident, we can take the same safety measures. We should take different safety measures. As we know that in road accident cases, we are forcing the people to wear helmets, seat belts. It's according to disaster management policy only. That is, if you are not wearing a helmet or a seat belt, that may cause your life or that may affect others' life, and due to that, a lot of losses will be happening to your family as well as the country. That's why we are mandatorily asking the pupil to wear helmet as well as seat belt. This is a precautionary measure to avoid disaster. And the next third point is protection of person and their assets while promoting and protecting all human rights, including the right to development. We should responsibly behave, and you should protect person and their properties during a protection of all human rights, including right to development. We should remember that our country is focusing on economical benefits, so we are trying to become a developed country. So we will definitely implement different methods, that is industries in our country, and automatically we can get good economical balance. But if there is an disaster happens, all these things may be damaged or blast out. So we should give a protection for the asset as well as the life while promoting human rights and including development. And engagement from all society. Whenever disaster management is going to happen, we should take assistance from all the part of the society. That may include the local people, volunteers, non-government agencies, government agencies, that may be police, fire force, hospital management, as well as the teachers, everyone in nearby that location, as well as who are trained for rescue operations. These are the main important thing that engagement from all of society. If any one of the society is against the disaster management policy, automatically whatever done by others also will be filed down. This is an important point. This is the fourth point, engagement from all of society. I will read again. Primary responsibility of state to prevent, reduce disaster risk. Primary responsibility is to reduce disaster risk. And they should take the corporation or international corporation as well as national level relation to overcome that disaster. And there should be a sharing in the responsibility between central government, national agencies, as well as sectors and stakeholders during a national disaster as well as a considering national circumstances. And protection of person from their assets while promoting and protecting human right, including the right to development. There are right to development for everyone, so we should give importance for sustainable development and protection against disaster while that development is installed. And there should be engagement from all of society. That is, there are different kinds of people in a society, and we need to take suggestions and help and their training, everything from that society. That may be local people, police, militants, hospitalities, fire force, then local people in volunteers. Everyone should actively participate in engagement term. And then fifth guiding principle is to full engagement of whole state institution, very important, full engagement of all state institution of executive, legislative nature at national and local level. We should engage all the state institutions, that include government institutions, private institutions who are responsible for reducing disaster. In some cases, if the availability of trained pupils are not as required, then we need to take people from the nearby area who are working in government and public sector and train them for a specific period to act in a disaster situation. Because in the last corona pandemic time, we can see that a lot of people who are in the different areas may allocated work for COVID-19 pandemic that include checking our what's say while we are traveling to here, we need to produce some certificate that we are not COVID-19 affected, and we are having very urgency to reach here. We will do quarantine for at least 7 days after reaching home. Everything should be controlled or checked by the government people as well as allocated personnels, that is volunteers. So those people may not be in the same area, the teachers or village assistants and people who are in working from home are directed to attend the duties as such, since the number of police person, fire force are as much as required in that condition. And it's very important for full engagement of all state institutions and executive and legislative nature at national and local level. This is very mandatory, or it's a very important guiding principle. And then comes empowerment of local authority and communities through resource, incentives, and decision making responsibility as appropriate. This is another point. We need to give responsibility for the local authorities. How we can give that one? By empowering them. We need to give resource, we need to give them incentives, and we need to give decision making capability, that's responsibilities to that local people or local authority to work in a disaster situation. We can see that in the last COVID-19 or currently, ASHA workers are doing the excess duty to collect the data of COVID-19 positive cases, as well as they are giving instruction to the people who were affected by COVID-19. When they are guiding the pupil, they may ask their house name, place, location, first, what say, there is any uh, direct contact person with you. Everything will be asked by the ASHA worker, as they were empowered to collect those data and guide the COVID-19 positive case pupil to stay in home. And next point comes decision making to be inclusive and risk information while using multi-hazard approach. Decision making is a mandatory process in every cases, so we cannot omit this section inclusively. One minute. That is, decision making should be taken care whenever we are planning for a disaster management. According to Sendai framework guiding principle, that making should be inclusive and risk informed while using multi-hazard approach. Whenever we are having a decision on disaster management, we should communicate it with the affecting or vulnerable community. We should take their suggestions too while we are taking a decision. Then only that will protect all their needs. That is, sometimes people may be, sometimes people may be having their own priorities, which is not meeting with the national policy. That's an example. And 1 minute. That is decision making. So next point is the eighth point. We have already mentioned 4 points in the previous slide, and now including all these four, the total guiding principles will become eight, and the eighth point is coherence of disaster risk reduction. That is, coherence of disaster risk reduction and sustainable development policies plans, practice, and mechanism across different sectors. It's a very important guiding principle. That is, we need to have a coherence in disaster direction. That is, when we are communicating with the police, we are communicating with a hospital person, they were in a different situation. The disaster management authority, district level or national level or state level, should take their suggestions and they have to give instruction guidelines for their working. That is police, militants, and hospitality. In every case, the policy, sustainable development policy, plan, and mechanism all should be taken by the suggestions or active participation of all these different areas. Also include the people from the local authority, the local community, because they may have their priority and they may have more than the people who are from the outside. They may have good view or escaping from a or overcoming from a disaster impact. These are the 8 guiding principles. And now comes ninth point, that is accounting of local and specific characteristics of disaster risk when determining measures to risk. That is, according to local and specific characteristics of disaster risk, we need to determine the measures of disaster risk. That is, we need to take what in a disaster situation we have to take definite number of measures to reduce the impact of risk or reduce the risk or reduce the disaster risk. For that, we need to have a local and specific characteristic. This is the ninth point. And also, the 10th point explains that the 10th point explains that addressing underlying risk factors of cost effectively through investment versus relying primarily on post disaster response and recovery. That is, we need to identify the inside meaning. That is, we can have a flood in our area, and even though when we are seeing a floody situation, we can say the flood may affect the local area and the people may damage their houses. They may lose their life if they were aware there or stay there. And in some cases, we have to focus a lot. Due to that, there may be another risk. That is, if a floody situation, some people may lose their certificates, some people may lose their houses, some people may lose their whole wealth during a disaster situation. In such situation, people may go depression, and due to that, that may cause a suicide of that respective family member who is earning for the family, and automatically that family completely comes under heavy threat of financial loss. And whenever we are thinking about post disaster response and recovery, we should focus on every risk factor invested in the disaster management. Every underlying risk factor that may not be the that may not be the risk which is available for us to solve. So next one is build back better for preventing creation of and reducing existing disaster risk. Whenever a disaster happens, after the disaster, we need to act responsibly. We need to take support from the society, and we should bring back or build back better infrastructure, everything after the disaster to come back in a situation far better than before. That is, whenever we are in a situation, we should think the same disaster may happen in the next upcoming years or upcoming decade. So we should be prepared to prevent that disaster. So we should build back better than existing. This is an important guiding principle to avoid or mitigate the impact of disaster. And also, the 11th, sorry, how much points we have discussed? 4 plus 4 plus 3, total 11 points we have discussed. Now the 12th point is the quality of global partnership and international cooperation to be effective, meaningful, and strong. That is, whenever we are focusing on international cooperation, there may be agreement between countries. If they are not following up well in a disaster situation, the people who are under threat cannot get the benefit of international cooperation. Whenever we are making a deal with another country, that should be effective and that should be very meaningful. There should be some meaning that this cooperation, this relation may help the people who are under the risk during a disaster. And why in a disaster, if the people who signed that we will help you, if that word is not keeping by the country, automatically that will affect the relation between the countries as well as the increased impact of disaster. So the quality of global partnership and international cooperation is very important, and we should have a guiding principle that Sendai framework says is mandatory to a guiding principle like the quality of global partnership and international cooperation. And we need to have a support from developed countries and partners to developing countries to be tailored according to needs and priorities as identified them. In different countries, United States of America is providing food and support during all the disaster situations. Even in Afghanistan, last few years back, when Taliban attacked them, they may helped the people of the Afghan to overcome from that terror attack. And India is helping Indonesia, Maldives, and Bangladesh during this COVID-19 pandemic, since other countries nearby India not having much support from the international agencies or not having much money to give vaccination for every people. So in India, we are producing Covishield as well as Covaxin, which has been transferred to the neighboring countries by the method Maitri. The term Maitri is friendship. For the friendship, India has given different types of helps during COVID-19 pandemic to nearby nations, especially Bangladesh. As we know that Bangladesh is the number of people in Bangladesh is very high. That population is very high compared to all other countries in the world other than India and China. So the location, the area is very less, but the population is very more. So the effect of COVID-19 is deeply affected Bangladesh. In such situation, India helped them as part of this thing, that is support from developed countries and partners to developing countries to be tailored according to the need and priorities as identified them. These are the 13, 13 guiding principles. And definitely we have priority for action. There is a need for focused action within and across the sectors of state and state at local, national, and regional and global level in the following priority areas. There are 4 priorities for Sendai framework. We should give important 4 priorities. What are they? First one is understanding the risk. Priority 1, we should understand the disaster risk, what will be the effect of disaster, and it's include dimension of vulnerability, capacity, exposure to person, asset, hazard characteristics, and the environment. First of all, we need to identify or understand the disaster risk. This is a first priority in a disaster management according to Sendai framework. And the second one, strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk. As we have already mentioned, how to strengthen the capacity building during a disaster management and what is the benefit of to making capacity building. And for that, we need to strengthen our disaster governance to manage disaster risk. It's very important. It's the second priority after the identification of disaster risk. We should strengthen our risk governance system or manage disaster risk management. And we should have coherence of national and local framework of law, regulation, public policies, and defining roles and responsibilities, guide, encourage, and incentives the public and private sector to take action and address disaster risk. This is the very important thing. We need to strengthen the disaster governance after identifying the disaster risk. Okay. After that, the next point is the next priorities investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience, for the resistance, for the reduction in disaster risk. We need to give investment. We need to invest public as well as private investment in disaster risk prevention. Then only we can save us from the disaster. There are structural, non-structural measures which are very essential for the social, health, economic, every areas of resilience of the people as well as community. So we have to invest in disaster risk reduction. And this can be a drivers of innovation. Definitely, whenever we are investing something, the people who are on the side of scientific or technology, they may implement new technologies to prevent disaster or mitigate the impact of disaster. It's very important. Third priority and final priority is enhancing. This is the final priority, that is enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response and to build back better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. That's whenever we are preparing the people, we have to prepare them properly. We have to build back them by the construct, reconstruction, which is very important for their lifestyle. When a disaster happens, please don't stop from the disaster. We have to recover, rehabilitation, same thing to bring back. So this is another important thing. There are four priorities, namely understanding the disaster risk, strengthening the disaster governance, investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience, and finally, enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response and to build back better in recovery and rehabilitation. So these are the four priorities, and according to disaster management Sendai framework, there are 7 global targets, 13 guiding principles, and 4 priorities. These are the important area. I am once again telling these are the 3 important area where the question, maximum question may ask you. Okay, hope you okay with the slide. And now we will discuss a small graph where different activities have been taken in the last 25 years for the protection against disaster or disaster risk reduction. That start from 1989, that is International Decade for National Disaster Reduction, Yokohama Strategy Plans 1994, International Strategy for Disaster Reduction in 1999, Hugo Framework in 2005, and finally in 2015, Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. These are the areas we have focused. And in 1992, we have the United States Convention on Climate Change, and 2015, Paris also, we have planned what is to be done during a climate change. We are altering our requirements according to these meetings. We are getting good suggestions from these meetings. So these are the important areas. Oh, please don't go. I will take the attendance 1 minute. Please tell me the attendance. I will ask the name. Akash KM,
Present, sir.
Agil M, Agil M, Amit K,
Present, sir.
Anirudh Suresh,
Present, sir.
Karthik Koderi,
Present, sir.
Ladin, Muhammad Ladin,
Present, sir.
Muhammad Shahzad KP,
Present, sir.
Mubtasim,
Present, sir.
Muhammad Asaf,
Present, sir.
Muhammad Fardin,
Present, sir.
Muhammad Falte,
Present, sir.
sorry,
Okay, sir.
Muhammad, okay, Muhammad Samar Shafiq,
Present, sir.
Muhammad Sian,
Present, sir.
മുഹമ്മദ് സിയാൻ അബി കുറെ ക്ലാസ് ആയിട്ടില്ലല്ലോ.
സാർ അത് എനിക്ക് മറ്റേ ഫോണിലായിട്ട് ഇഷ്യൂ ഉണ്ട്.
ഓക്കെ. നിഷാക്ക്,
Present, sir.
നിവേദ് കുമാർ,
Present, sir.
പ്രത്യുഷ് പ്രേമരാജൻ, പ്രത്യുഷ് പ്രേമരാജൻ ഇല്ല. രാഹുൽ രാജീവ്,
Present, sir.
സരുൺ രാജീവ്,
Present, sir.
സൗരാഗ്, സൗരാഗ് ഇല്ല. സൗരവ് ശ്രീജിത്ത് കെ എം,
Present, sir.
സൗരവ് അറ്റൻഡൻസ് വളരെ കുറവാണല്ലോ. ശ്രീരാഗ് വിജയൻ,
Present, sir.
വിഷ്ണു എ പി,
Present, sir.
വിഷ്ണു എൻ, വിഷ്ണു എൻ, ആദർശ് മനോഹർ, ആദർശ്. ഓക്കെ, താങ്ക് യു ഫോർ ലിസണിങ്. ക്ലാസ് മുതൽ നമ്മൾ റിവിഷനിലേക്കാണ് പോകുന്നത്. വി ഹാവ് കംപ്ലീറ്റഡ് അവർ സിലബസ്.